Thanks to you all for coming out. My name is Darin, came in here from Austin, Texas, a few of us here today to talk to you about our experience in embedded analytics. So I hope it's a fun story. This is not my first time to MicroStrategy World. It's my second. Last year we came and told our story, but it was very early on. So maybe between year 1 and 2 of our implementation. Now we're 1 year later. I feel like we're a little smarter, have a few more war stories, and so here to share the obstacles and how we surmounted some of those obstacles here today with you. Last time I was here, I came working for the same company, but with a different name. So I worked for NI, also known as National Instruments. They were recently acquired about 6 months ago by Emerson Electric, now a St. Louis-based company. And now we're in the process of merging in that process. So I'm from Emerson, but hopefully I'm familiar and known as from NI. And NI still exists in general. I thought I'd get a little background on us here. Now, Emerson is generally a global leader in automation and automating factories, making valves and pumps and things to help even like a water treatment plant function correctly. Whereas NI is more in test and measurement. So all the devices you use on a daily basis, how do we make sure those things are working at a high level? How do we catch defects in the factory? How do we do things in laboratories to capture phenomenon, like even instrumentation in the Large Hadron Collider, making little tiny black holes in Switzerland somewhere. There's one-off science experiment things. NI is the provider for those kinds of control systems and test and measurement systems. So we are still NI still exists in terms of a brand for hardware and our software, but it's generally a fairly autonomous business group within Emerson. And we're here to help engineers solve the world's hardest problems, really. We make really high precision measurements off hardware, so it's known as being super duper accurate, pulling in measurements. That's not gonna be your bargain basement measurement, but you really wanna get that 8th or 9th digit of precision, then we're the tool for you. And then we also build software experiences to help bring all those phenomenon into your system, into a desktop or something, and then do something with that data intelligently. That's broadly what NI and Emerson do. Specifically, I'm going to talk about semiconductor tests. That's one of our markets, and that's what I'm primarily responsible for today. So maybe you raise your hand if you're familiar with semiconductor market. Maybe a quarter of you. So I'll give you a quick breakdown of this. So we take it for granted, the little chips we have and the little green boards with all the chips today, there's a lot that goes into making those. So you have to get the silicon crystal created. You have to get those rare earth minerals put together. You spin up a silicon crystal. They generally make these round cylinders, which is why when you see a picture of like a clean lab from Taiwan or East Asia or something, there's all these little round discs. Each of those round discs are just the silicon, and then you can use a process called lithography and imprint circuits on the silicon. And these circuits do not have the black kind of resin on it and with little spider legs sticking out, which is what you're familiar with seeing. It's like a pre-stage, right? It's kind of like you got an early cut at what this chip is gonna do. You can now do a bunch of electrical tests on it. Check for shorts, check for little defects. It turns out lithography is not a perfect process. Like 95% of the time it's gonna work, 5% of the time it's gonna halfway work. Yeah, and you have to kind of test this thoroughly to make sure you don't put out a bad chip in the end of the day. So you build out these wafers, they call them. These wafers then get sliced up into little pieces and then created into chips and dropped into boards and put in your pocket. And now you have a phone with all sorts of little tiny radios inside the chip and all sorts of complicated complexity hidden away in there. And so, we're here talking about how we get this electrical test data. We capture all this data, and what do we do with it? So our product is known as Optimal Plus Global Operations. I mentioned all these different steps. These all happen in different parts of the world. So let's say you get the silicon ingot from Australia, and then you do the fabrication in Taiwan. And then your development house deciding what the circuit is in California. And there's different companies that have to coordinate and spend money with each other, and they don't necessarily trust each other. So there's a lot of checking and rechecking. Does this thing meet spec? Is this thing a good product to get the end of the day, the product you want? So you're doing a lot of tests like this where you're checking for electrical connectivity. And with our product, we are proud to say that we have over 100 billion devices produced each year that go through our test systems on these factory floors and things. Each year. In terms of the software itself, we take in the data from these testers and we put them in a centralized database. And then we have some tools to help you analyze that data. And so right now, our legacy product, which is what I'm showing up here, basically a .NET application written on like a Windows Server 2012 sort of instance, and that's what the state of the art today for getting this sort of job done. And our goal here is to help users take in all that data and make some concrete decisions. Hey, was this wafer any good? Which parts were bad? If they're bad, put them in the garbage bin. If they were kind of half bad, maybe you can sell them for cheap. If they're really good, you sell them for premium, and then you dish them out into all the different devices. It turns out there's a lot of different companies with a lot of different approaches here, both on a business side and from a technical perspective on like what they care about and how they declare something good or bad. And so each customer has their own sort of way of going about that. And that's our challenge, to kind of be the bridge, the one company that can kind of keep these people aligned. And they're all very, very much in like a closed silo from one another. It's a very competitive space. There's not a lot of sharing. If you look at the market, you can't even find demos of the software that does this stuff online. There's just nothing out there. Now what we're trying to do is take that .NET experience of looking at dashboards and coming up with insights and elevate that up into the browser and enter MicroStrategy as a partner key to making that happen. And we are trying to use them as an embedded instance. So though I'm showing a dashboard in a browser with some wafers in it, which is good, this is going to be one of many different web applications in a global operations web front end. So you can imagine there's a lot more than just looking at the insights of data. Maybe you have to coordinate with teams when the testers are operating. You got to go figure out what orientation your wafers are. You need to schedule time with the lab manager. There's all these different functions. So we're going to build this out. But the very first one we're concerned with is this dashboard technology that we can use to replace this older legacy piece of software. Now we've had I'm going to call it 3 challenges in this talk that we hit along the way. Maybe unique to us, but as I've talked to people in the last couple of days, maybe not so unique. So hopefully you get that's a good takeaway from this. The first is that we really need to make many tailored deployments. So these customers, like I said, they have their own way of doing things, their own way of storing data, their own security requirements, their own statistical analysis they want to do. And if you have, say, 20 customers, we're going to need to deploy our OEM branded flavor of MicroStrategy 20 times with 20 different IT departments in the mix, keeping them up to date, fixing bugs, making sure they're successful. It's a pretty big lift. And I'll talk about some of the things we've done to help decrease the load on that. The second piece is providing both self-service and big data at the same time. Doing one or the other, easier. Together, a little trickier for sure. So, each customer cannot necessarily agree on a set schema. There's not like a great query that pulls back just the data they want. These product engineers are sitting on the floor and they each have 30 years of experience in how to do this, and they all don't necessarily agree on the right way. So we need to have a way where they can go through and do kind of detailed analysis, but not necessarily with code, right? They don't really want to write code. So the self-service capability of MicroStrategy gets us a lot of the way, but we need to get massive amounts of data. So I'll talk about the scale of data a little more that we have to challenge ourselves to do. The third piece is doing this advanced analysis. So, I mentioned customers have their own statisticians that have their own techniques here. They want to look at the six sigma tails on this set of data from the mean. They want to go do a chi-square distribution thing. I have to go get my statistics book whenever I talk to these guys and just remember what the heck we're even talking about anymore. There are some great functions in MicroStrategy, but we got to go to some serious next level stuff for these semiconductor companies. So a lot of what we do in our product on the server side, where we're housing all this data, is we have the ability to run our own sort of machine learning algorithms and try and derive insights and prevent bad parts from getting shipped out to customers on accident. So example is if you look at a wafer, you say, oh, this one's marginal, and okay, I'm gonna throw that one away for sure. Well, what about all the neighbors of that thing? Maybe you just go ahead and throw all those away. It's better. You're not gonna take a risk on something that may be potentially a risk to have in your shipping to customers. So with machine learning, AI, that sort of piece, more on the back end because we have to operate on a lot of data. So we have kind of daemons, processes running and triggering what we call rules and alerting people when there's a problem. And so we got to tie all that together somehow into this dashboarding. That's kind of our challenge. Okay. So first on the tailored deployments, just getting everyone to agree on cloud or not cloud or on-prem. I mean, that's part of the fun, part of the battle. I don't know. A lot of our customers, maybe they get on board with putting their data in the cloud. A lot of them definitely won't. They want to have everything close to the vest and in-house. Their data, their processes, their statistics, that's like their secret sauce. They don't want to get that in the world. So So far, what we've done is we've come up with 2 different solutions to them for them. One is a pure cloud deployment. This is a bit of an eye chart, but you can see on the left of here, there's an on-premise box. It's a lot smaller on one side. On the cloud piece, most things are not on-premise besides the people and whatever kind of apps they have to run. Whereas on the hybrid case, you're taking like a Vertica instance and keeping that on-prem, and you're then pulling data over through some sort of high bandwidth pipe into the cloud space. And both these techniques seem to work. Hybrid has proven to be more challenging to get set up right, because you have to do a lot of negotiation between the IT departments to sort that out. But they're both up and running for us. So. Just to get these things out is not so simple. So we've developed a whole bunch of different Ansible scripts and Helm charts and things to help get these environments set up at each customer. So make sure that like we have a release once a quarter or something, we want to push that out. How do we make sure everyone has the same version? What features do they even have access to? This is challenging to manage. So we spent a lot of time and energy trying to get these sort of configuration scripts running and automate our deployments as much as possible. And this is a work in progress, but we're making progress month over month here. So slowly but surely, processes that take weeks are starting to take days, and soon they'll be taking hours. Another piece we do is that we generate all the data model stuff in our MicroStrategy instances programmatically. So we use all the APIs to, Mysterio.py, I think is what we use, and Python to tickle MicroStrategy and tell it what are the attributes and the metrics and the facts and things. But we've also gone a step back and created a tool that will then generate the code that does that. And the tool operates on a set of configuration files. The configuration files are in source code control. Now we have a way to iteratively build out the data model. So for each of these customers, if they have a little unique piece, we can track what is different for customer A versus customer B. How do we know from version to version what's changing? We have a way to in a more disciplined fashion, understand what is changing in these environments and keep them in line. So pretty excited about that. But in the end of the day, there's still a complex set of microservices in every kind of deployment we have, and keeping them in a good state has proven to be a challenge. And a lot of it is that the customer doesn't necessarily know what to tell us when we go to deploy it, and we find out there's some non-functional requirement late in the game, and now we have to really scramble. Oh, they have some of the things we ran into. MicroStrategy requires a whole lot of different IP addresses, like 200, I think, to deploy correctly. Customers don't think that's a problem initially, but when they go to put it live, they're like, hey, this thing, I ran out of IP addresses. I was like, oh yeah, we told you needed 200. Okay, well now what do we do? Like, how do we move forward from there, right? And identifying these things early as possible is really what is the saving grace. It's not sexy work. They're not great, fun conversations, but they're super important for success, and especially things like security requirements. Everyone's got a different philosophy on security. There isn't necessarily one right way. So if you're gonna do it 20 times, you're gonna have to do your homework, make sure you got all that covered. And another thing we've seen is that some customers really want to lock in a specific cloud vendor, so a different hyperscaler. So if they already want Amazon Web Services, maybe they want to use like all the different pieces of that through and through. They don't want to have some things that are customer open source. They want to just use the Amazon thing. Well, that's now like making things more complicated as well. So you can't change people's minds. You can't run their IT departments. End of the day, you have to work with them and negotiate if you want them to be successful. All right, so the second challenge I want to talk about is the big data and self-service piece. So I mentioned we have lots of data. In this case, we say have like a petabytes of data in this, we call O+ Central. And yes, I said petabytes. That's a lot of bytes. It's 1,000 terabytes, I believe. And how do we get that data chiseled down in a place where we can do something with it? Well, in our case, we're using MicroStrategy reports, and we're using prompts to a degree. This has been our first cut at this, where we can extract out a small slice of the petabytes of data. Now we can get that out over in the dossier and rely on the features of filtering and try and get people to work on different layers of aggregation. Not maybe you go all the way to the most minute raw data. If they can keep them in more summary or aggregations of data and operate on that and filter there, then that's better. And it's also, we're saying that like our customers, it's not like there's just one data source. They may have an Excel sheet with a bunch of different specs that the characterization engineer gave them, and they want to like stitch that into the dashboard and look at that relative to the tester data. They want to look at COGS or something, so they have financial data on the parts and making these things. And they want to stitch that in. That's all things that can be done. So we need to be able to put other pieces of data in with all this super technical engineering data and put it in one spot. And one thing we're doing is that the prompted report has like a weakness in our side of like, we want to have a different UI for helping people build these queries out. The prompts are, for us, is pretty long. They're multiple pages. That's not really what prompts are supposed to be used for. So right now we're in the process of trying to use the embedded capability to suppress the prompt UI and replace that with a more custom UX. And we got web designers working on that as we speak in Austin somewhere. And we'll be trying to present our own face on the prompt so that we can still get the same sort of outcome. That's where we've landed. The other piece is just the scale of data. It is immense. Questions I've heard, or statements, not questions, requirements I've been given time to time, is that I want to plot 1 million points on a scatter. I want to put 10 million points on a box plot. I want to display 10 million die on a wafer. I want to look at 1 billion points when looking over for trends over the last 6 or 12 months. Like, that's madness, right? Like, you want to try and download 1 billion data points just in your browser? Like, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know it's going to be challenging. So, how are we dealing with this problem? Well, the main thing we're trying to do is with the dossier design itself, if we can find a way to present layers of the data at aggregations, so they're operating on the smallest set of data they need at a time, and then they sort of jump off from an aggregated point down to the next layer now that they've filtered. So you kind of like build out and try and keep only so much data in view at a time if you can. And that's really desirable, but sometimes not possible depending on how complex our customer wants to get. Another piece is that we're looking at custom visualizations, building our own different HTML plugins and JavaScript plugins and plugging those into MicroStrategy so we can do things like reduce the data before we show it. So it's a quick little video of like our wafer control. So I mentioned these wafers around. You can imagine this is one with 340,000 die on a wafer. And you can zoom in, and then here's a little experiment we had. I think we had 1 million we were trying to get working. It looks like the sun or something. So you can dial in on a sunspot. And you may think, why are they looking at this stuff? It's like kind of insane. But the reality is these engineers look at these pictures day in, day out, and they're good at seeing little pictures and little patterns. And they'll say, oh, that's a scratch. That's an O configuration. That means like someone's beard hair got stuck in the nozzle in the test machine or something. And it was like, okay, well, if you say so. And so we're trying to give them this information right now as we're focused on. I do think there's some promise maybe of all this AI bot stuff technology. In the long run, maybe we can get to a point where they don't have to go looking at a picture of the sun, looking for sunspots to find problems, and there's another better way. But right now, this market moves pretty slow. It's not going to change overnight. So I think we got a good 5 to 10 years of solving these kinds of problems before they're clamoring for an AI bot to solve that problem as well. But we'll see. We'll see how it works out. Okay. Let's see if I can advance. Slide. Okay, so the third piece I want to talk about is the advanced analysis. So here's a little snapshot of our legacy product. And what I would say is like a pretty bread and butter, mundane visualization we have where there's a histogram on one side and then maybe a dispersion chart above that. And our customers really want to see these like vertical lines saying like, hey, where's the mean? Where's like the 3 sigma line? Where's the 6 sigma line? I have like a specific limit. I know the part will like break the device if it ever crosses this threshold, so make sure it never goes over this certain mark. And actually just getting these vertical lines to show up in MicroStrategy has proven to be a bit of a challenge because they're not really calculated from the data. So MicroStrategy out of the box is really good at like doing standard deviations and averages and things on the data. But there's only like 6 or 7 canned options there. We need to like pull a value from the database and make that vertical line kind of track as you change what test you're looking at. It's got to shift around in there. So we call these limit lines, and these limit lines are really key, kind of table stakes for even like getting in the door with these customers and telling them you have a reasonable product. So, in the short run here, what we've got is we're leveraging Vitara charts. You saw them in the booth out there to help us build these sort of lines that are then tied to a metric value specifically. That's going to work for the short term, and then I'll talk about how we, if eventually we're making our own visualizations as well, we may end up building our own kind of limit line capability into our own custom charts eventually. These are all things that we're discussing right now. Okay, I'm gonna show a quick little demo video, if I can get it to play here. Of just like how one of these dashboards might look like. On the idea here is often there's like a table of different test results and things. The customer really wants to see like a box plot with a lot of different features in it. Today, I can't really make a box plot with all the features in one spot, so what we've done is stack 3 controls that are all good at one specific capability. So on the bottom, I have the box plot, which shows the box, which is great. In the middle, I have the Vitara chart, which is a 1D scatter, which can show the limit lines, which is great. And then on the top, I have the 1D scatter from MicroStrategy, which lets me select with a lasso tool and say, these are the points I want to take a closer look at. Let me bookmark that, share it with a colleague, and tell them to investigate. That's what the third one's for. We need to get this down into like one visualization. That's like our next challenge. This is like a lot for people to take in all these dots running around. But it's a really important use case to say, hey, look, these things are outside the limit. Therefore, I want to like select them, exclude them. And then another piece we have, we want to be able to exclude points and sort of save off like a little table of that. So it's almost like a work list for somebody. Hey, these are the problem units. I need to get an expert from my team to go take a look at these units. And that's definitely something we have to do with our workflow. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is how we've tried to give this advanced math to our user base. So we've been a heavy user of the calculated metrics and the formula capability of MicroStrategy to do things. They're fairly one-liner Excel. If you put it in an Excel formula, then like that's roughly the level of complexity you can get to with one of these calculated metrics. And they're your friend. I would say usually. More often than not, I have to take the formula and put it in Notepad and get all my parentheses lined up if I'm going to be making any kind of complicated formula. It's not super error tolerant, but if you can get it, you can get the magic formula created, paste it in, probably pretty good shape. And it's kind of nice this executes on the front end of the data server. We have the capability to run calculations in the database side, so that works great at scale. With the MicroStrategy, we can do things on the front end. So if I remove a problem unit, I want to see if that brought my numbers down. And now I'm in an acceptable range. That's like a really useful thing to do. But the next step for us is like going beyond these one-liner formula items and getting into scripting languages like Python and R, and being able to execute those both on the front end and on the back end of that system, and try and get things done. Like here I was able to make a probability plot in the upper right with some simple formulas, and that's great. But we have to do some more complicated things as well. The other piece is that even generating the data query involves running a lot of math. So like I want to go excavate data from this petabytes of stuff. Well, I may say, oh, only give me things where the entropy of the test result is like greater than 2. And if I'm like beyond some kind of like threshold for the mean, give me every test like that, and then only give me the first 5 results, or whatever. There's all these different like things with it to create. And this is the self-service part of this that's like challenging for us. So our legacy tool has a pretty sophisticated multi-step wizard experience that we're trying to now bring that into the 21st century as well on the web. This is a more custom engineering sort of solution. We're going to have to build our own HTML thing that generates this query. And then if we can do that, and then tie that into MicroStrategy to actually execute the query and bring the data back into a nice dashboard, that's where we're trying to get. And we may find we want to run Python to even like get the query running or something. It's pretty interesting stuff. All right, so that's really a summary of the challenges we had. And really, if we can get through these challenges in a really sufficient way, the idea here is that we start to really blow out our competition and blow our minds of our users just off the basics of MicroStrategy platform, right? So great example of this. Today, you have what you call a characterization engineer. They're an early design person, so they get like a prototype chip. They run a bunch of tests on it. They'll generate like a 500, 800 page report and say, oh, look, it meets all these specs. Like it's all within the limits. This is great. Well, now, maybe we can make MicroStrategy build a 700 page report. Sure, that might be challenging. Maybe we can do it. But maybe better is you don't ever make that report, because what the heck do you need a 700 page report for besides putting it in a file somewhere and making sure you don't get sued, which actually is one of the use cases. They don't want to get, they want to prove that it's a CYA. I checked everything, like we're good, put it in the vault. So we'll have to solve that problem, but really it's like, how do we really get to the next layer here? So you can imagine getting these production test people and these characterization engineers to use the collaboration tools in MicroStrategy. I see a test that's out of its limit. I can tag the person who wrote that test with an @ mention and say, come take a look at this. They can then rerun results, inject that back into the database. After like a couple hours, you get new data showing up and you can see that it got fixed on a retest or something. That would be like a game changer. And I was talking to these guys, our customers that have these like global design meetings. I mentioned it's all very distributed around the world. You can think, so you get 2 hours with all the key people. How hard is that to do on a week-to-week basis, right? You may get like twice a month a meeting like that together. Well, in that meeting, if you're just looking at static screenshots of graphs, which is kind of the state of the art right now, and they say, I want to dig into that, that's like a funny data point, that's a whole thing now that you have to take offline and kind of align all the stars, get that group of people together after going and running a bunch of new analyses. There's no reason why you can't just pop up, and if it was a live dashboard, you go up and do a little quick analysis there. It wouldn't take long to correlate a couple things live in front of a group. These are the sorts of things where we think we're going to win with our product, and we're excited with MicroStrategy to kind of get there and kind of take semiconductor test software in the next positive place. So, okay, that's really our story. So plenty of time for questions if you want to get into that. I think there's a mic that we can float around here. Yeah, maybe right here on the side here.
So what data integration tool are you using for extracting the data and doing transformations?
So what tools are we using to extract the data and do transformations?
Yeah, so essentially, I don't want to just say ETL because there is more. There is ELT patterns. Maybe if you do it raw data first and store it somewhere, maybe do push downs in some sort of compute in the cloud. So whatever data integration or data ingestion tools you guys are using would be good to know.
So I think to answer that, I would say we're using Vertica heavily. We get a lot of columnar shaped data. You can think of a test being run. A typical case is like you have a chip, you want to put it in like 5 different temperature conditions. You might run it under 5 different clocking speeds. You might have like 3 or 4 different radios with different RF like scenarios going through it. So you have like just a bunch of floating point numbers in a big column for each of these scenarios, and each column is a different condition. So you get this real big kind of column shaped chunk of data. So we found that Vertica is pretty good for performance on that. And we're a key partner of theirs. We work closely with Vertica for years, and that's something our current tool uses. Got one in the back there.
How did you guys decide on prompted reports? How did that work, and why did you guys move from that?
Yeah, how did it work with prompted reports? Well, we're on the journey. I'm not sure we're positive. We love where we're at right now. It's a hot topic conversation back at the home office. It's able to get us to where we are, which is great. The problem is we've abused what prompts are supposed to do. I think we're not really like putting it all on one page. So we're taking a wizard and kind of overlaying it into a UI that was never meant to be a wizard. And so that's probably not a great thing to do. We probably shouldn't have done that. So in that sense, the way we've adopted it is not amazing. But I think if you can go in the embedded playground, you can take the prompt, you can suppress it and put your own UI instead. And so that's really what we're doing right now. And we're haggling over what that UI should look like and what's appropriate to present to the user in that case. But we think with the embedded capabilities that's our kind of out for presenting a better experience in the end. One off there, maybe. You got to go split in half, man.
Hey, thank you very much for the presentation. It's really good. I had a quick question. It seemed like, just based on your presentation, you are on like a lot of change and changing up a lot of like the way that the consumer receives the information. And you said that you were in relatively like slow moving industry. I'm in financial services, also pretty slow moving. So from the change management angle, was this a lot on your team, or did you implement help from like other departments that are more like HR focused or training focused to kind of help get these like material or trainings out the door and people accept them, Yeah.
I mean, for sure, it's a big cross-organizational effort. So we have a customer education for training, and we're just in like our nascent kind of stage of that because we haven't created all the different dashboards that we want fully. We have like a few, but we really want to get to like a wider set before we start getting wide on the training. We have a customer success group, probably parallel to how MicroStrategy is organized these days. They have a customer success kind of allocation to each customer, and they're in charge of like scheduling when the updates will occur. How do we orchestrate that with the timeline on the customer side? When do they even want do they even want an update? Sometimes they just lock on an old version, and they're stuck on one for 4 years or something. And we're like, guys, you're not getting any new features. You're like trapped in like a time capsule or something. Like, they don't want to accept the change. But we basically, each customer has their own sort of person and account team also that is like trying to bring them forward. the thing is, if they don't ever upgrade, then they tend to get stagnated, and then we don't compare well to competitors if you like don't see the last 4 years of development on the product. So yeah, of course we want to get them to update as much as possible. It turns out that like, depending on the customer, there could be a whole train of activities required to even get like a simple upgrade. Even though that's like transparent under the hood, they might have like 4 different staging environments. They want to have proving grounds. They want to go put it there and make sure it doesn't crash some other random thing, and they'll put it there. It's a little, to me, it's a little conservative when we're talking about just the dashboarding side, because at the end of the day, it's a web page and a web server, but it's kind of bundled up with this whole like data management piece, which is super duper important, and you can't have that scramble eggs your data. So that part is, it's a struggle, and we have our own IT department, and then the customer's IT department. We have to engage on that level as well. And in general, these kinds of sales, these kinds of customers, it's not like transactional, right? It's not like I can give you a price and then you're like, yeah, I'll buy that thing off the shelf. No, there's like all these executives with suits and ties that meet all over the world. There's a whole lot of complexity to even making the sale and keeping the commercial side of us happy. So, making these complex enterprise grade sales is something we're living, and it's a challenge, but there is a prize at the end if you can get there, I suppose, like of contracts, which are nice. So.
Thank you. Are you using the cubes to cache the data? And if yes, what is the size of the cubes?
Yeah, so are we using the cubes? So right now, we are actively working on better using the cubes to cache our data. So I can't answer that question yet. That's like some in-flight work of ours. So far, we just know that's the right thing to do, and we haven't started doing it in earnest. We have done it in this, when I mentioned that maybe you want to pull like an Excel data or a CSV piece of data in, like, yeah, we're using cubes for that to a degree, but we want to have it be the caching layer in a lot of ways with all our summary data, so make that really, really fast. And so that's something that I don't have like guidelines on the sizes yet. That's something we're going to be figuring out in R&D here in the next couple months. So
thank you.
Thank you to my mic guy. He's awesome. Getting the steps in.
Thank you for the presentation. You displayed an image showing your infrastructure and how you've chosen to go with a hybrid model. Are you concerned that in the future that may not be supported by MicroStrategy because it's hybrid and not MicroStrategy kind of ask their customers to go with?
That's interesting. I'm not specifically concerned about it. I'd say in general, we're not pushing the hybrid model to everybody. It's kind of like the harder road. I would rather them just do a cloud that like my company would manage. That would be better. Maybe someday we get to the MicroStrategy managed cloud, but I think because we want to embed it, we're not going to go down that road. We're going to like try and own that ourselves, and have our own kind of quasi SaaS product, I suppose, someday, multi-tenant, all these things we want to do that are not necessarily required at the moment. But I think as we, there's some stuff I mentioned in the keynote, still working through that. It was like any cloud, I think was the capability. Like that sounds pretty exciting for us because we'd have more control over the versions of dependencies and things, and we wouldn't be, sometimes we're kind of forced to do something on a timeline we didn't really want to right now, but I think with that, the hope is that it like unshackles us a little bit from those kinds of decisions. So anything I'm like more optimistic, I guess, I'm hoping. But again, basing a lot off of a great soundbite from the keynote. So. Mic on route.
I saw you had a slide about calculations in dossier versus server-side calculations. Is there a level of complexity where you say we can't do this in dossier, or how to move it to the server side?
For sure. And I'm not sure if it's like, I'm not certain it's complex. I mentioned like we're really early in our Python script sort of place. So what we want to do in our web framework is basically, you can imagine having like a Jupyter Notebook Python instance like in our web application. And then we can build a tight integration between one part of our web app with MicroStrategy and one part of the web app that runs the scripts. So we think we can get to pretty sophisticated front-end analyses. And we have other products that we make that do something like this. So we're like fairly confident about that. Now for sure, certain, like we outgrown calculated metrics at that point. So we're looking at generating our own sort of attributes and metrics, I guess, from these scripts. And that's just something we have to spend time on development to get that done. The bigger problem becomes like the scale of data. If you want your script to operate on every piece of data that came through the tester, that's like probably not going to work out very well. Because like, one, you don't even have the web page open to trigger this, right? It's not going to be a background process. These testers are running 24/7. Data is just flowing in. So something in the background needs to be number crunching and running these scripts. That's where, we think maybe that's not part of the MicroStrategy part of the solution, but it's our proprietary contribution on the server side with these testers. Can we do something at the machine when it's being tested, notice something grossly wrong, and like maybe even take an action, like kick that wafer off in the dustbin or something, like if it had a really terrible error, one of those beard hairs, man, like, that's like a real problem, by the way. I can't believe that. You see these clean room pictures, there's a reason, I guess, like you get that beard hair in there, that's a big problem. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Only bald people in the clean room. That's a good rule of thumb. All right. Well, no other questions. I'll hang out front. You can come chat with us afterwards if you like. Thanks a lot.